It's that time of month again where we have to look at another headphone amplifier. Last month I reviewed the SMSL SU-9, one of SMSL's newest balanced DACs. That product cost nearly $500, a price that I think is far above and beyond what it really should cost. The SU-9 has a matching amplifier called the SH-9. This is a product that costs nearly $300. Apos Audio was kind enough to send me the SU-9 and the SH-9 for review. I know more and more people are becoming wary of Amazon, eBay, and other less than transparent online resellers. I recommend Apos Audio for your audiophile shopping. I have purchased gear from them before and their service is exemplary. Check out Apos Audio if you have an itch for new gear. So, is the SH-9 a $300 masterpiece as some might have you believe, or is it a questionable product? Guess where I stand on this. The SH-9 is built around the same chassis as the SU-9. The two products are nearly identical in size. Both have the same LCD screen on the front, the same knob for menu control, and use the same remote for functionality. The SH-9 is sturdy. It is not particularly heavy, but it sits perfectly still on the desk. Plugging and unplugging headphones does not cause the SH-9 to move. The rubber feet keep the amp in place. The SH-9 has one balanced XLR input and one balanced XLR output. It also has unbalanced RCA in and a 1/4 inch out. You can use either input to send signal to either output. The SH-9 has two gain options, standard, which SMSL for some reason calls low, and high gain. High gain adds an additional 10 decibel boost. The menu also has something called volume mode. The sub-menu provides the option to enable or disable this feature. With volume mode enabled, the amp reduces the number of relay switches per turn of the volume knob. With the mode disabled, each turn of the volume knob jumps to the next relay step. With the mode disabled, you can hear the volume click with each turn. With the mode enabled, you can hear the click every 2 turns of the volume knob. SMSL says that the volume mode enabled will make the relays last longer. My position on the matter is that if there's a bad relay, I'd rather know about it while the amp is still in warranty. The last option in the menu is the screen brightness. The LCD screen is bright but has very limited use. The screen will always display the current volume. You will see which input is selected and what the gain is set to. The SH-9 is a no-frills amplifier. There's nothing wrong with its overall footprint and build. The startup time for the amp is about 4 seconds, which is plenty fast. Of course, we cannot forget the THX 888 module in the SH-9. THX and its hype machine won't let us forget, no matter how much we really want to. I have said this countless times and I have to say it again. THX modules are not a feature anymore. They are useless gimmicks, and companies use THX specifications to proclaim that THX topology provides, quote, lower coloration and distortion and natural real sound. This is bogus. It is misleading. It is a total lie. The measured numerical differences between THX topology and conventional op-amp implementation might be quite real, but whether you actually hear a difference is not a given. So once again, THX implementation is marketing fluff. And considering that THX is a subsidiary of Razer, you should not be surprised that THX is pushing its components into every nook and cranny it can. The other bogus aspect of the SH-9 is that third-party tests indicate that this amplifier is not a true balanced amp. Yes, it has balanced XLR in and out, but the internal topography apparently is not balanced. As far as the features go, the SH-9 has nothing noteworthy. Balanced output can be found in $100 products like the Loxi P20, so seeing it in the $300 SH-9 is not particularly impressive, especially if it's not actually balanced. However, I do appreciate the overall simplicity of design and function. There's no need to complicate a headphone amplifier after all. I have done many amplifier reviews. I usually talk about the sound signature and go from one frequency range to the next. I am going to change things up a little bit in this video. I am not going to spend much time talking about the sound signature. I am instead going to delve into comparisons. However, to satiate your curiosity, I did listen to the SH-9 for a few weeks. I had it plugged into the SU-9, Shitmodi 3, and Songcause LAQXD1 DACs. All of these units are neutral sources. I played music through Amazon Music HD and my FLAC library. I used numerous headphones including the Allo Audio S4R, Avantone Planar, and the Shure SRH-1540 among many others. The bottom line is that the SH-9 is neutral. It neither accentuates or de-emphasizes any particular frequency. When connected to a neutral source, the SH-9 does not alter the sound signature. The bass is impactful and clear. The mids sound natural without harshness or unusual grain. The treble is as neutral on the SH-9 as I have heard on any other neutral source. Now, maybe some of you were hoping for more details. I am not going to do that. This is because I have comparisons to do for you, and these comparisons are far more instructive than I thought would be the case. Let me explain why. I started this channel 2.5 years ago. Since then, I have received a number of interesting opinions about how gear performs or sounds. One aspect of DACs and amps that always comes up is the notion that the newest amplifier or DAC has better sound than the older product. People use the vague term dynamics and generously sprinkle flowery language to describe what they hear. Unfortunately, few people ever do real A/B tests. I was curious about the SH-9's ability to perform against far cheaper products. I wanted to know what all the fuss is about. So, I set up a testing parameter. First, I plugged the SH-9 into a passive A/B switch. That switch was connected to my SH Mode 3. I used a second amp for comparison, and that was the Monolith Liquid Spark. I listened with my Allo S4R and played music through Amazon Music HD. I volume matched, and this was rather easy to do with the A/B switch. I listened to my test playlist, about a dozen compositions by Beethoven and random music that Amazon happened to suggest. For the Liquid Spark, I had it at high gain with its volume knob at 9 o'clock. I had the SH-9 on low gain with its volume set at 50. This was matched volume. I listened for over an hour, going back and forth on the A/B switch. I did not reposition or take the headphones off during this period. I paid attention for any alteration in the sound signature. There was none. And when I say none, I mean absolutely zero. Zip, nada, nothing. There was literally no audible difference in bass response, decay, transients, mids, treble, detail, or resolution. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, over and over and over again. It sounded like the same signal with the same volume, unaltered. I then changed the parameters. I compared the SH-9 to my SH Magni Heresy. I plugged both into my passive A/B switch. This time, I used the SU-9 with an RCA splitter. I kept gain on both amps to low. I was able to volume match on the Haldea's Avantone Planar mod. The SH-9 was at volume step 60. The Magni was set at 1 o'clock. I listened to very bassy tracks like Irodori by Kodo, Mountains by Hans Zimmer, and Conquer by Overwork. I listened to pop, rock, jazz, orchestral, and some soundtracks. I switched back and forth. There was no audible difference in timbre, clarity, or tonality. Decay of instruments was identical. Both amplifiers sounded nearly identical in every way. The only difference that I could barely make out was that some vocals seemed just a tiny bit louder on the Heresy, but that could easily be attributed to imprecise volume matching. I next changed the comparison amplifier but continued to use the SU-9 as the DAC. This time I used the FIO K5 Pro through its line input. In other words, I used the K5 Pro's amp section and bypassed its internal DAC. Because the K5 Pro has less power output than the SH-9, I switched to the Audeze LCD-1 as my test headphone. I set gain on the K5 to high. I kept gain on the SH-9 to normal. I was able to volume match with the SH-9 at step 40 and the K5 Pro at around 10 o'clock. I repeated the test as before. I listened to my test playlist all over again. This time, there was a minor difference. It was subtle, but just about present. The K5 Pro had slightly smoother vocals than the SH-9. More specifically, vocal grain seemed a bit recessed on the K5 Pro and fairly accurate, precise on the SH-9. This was evident on Orla Gartland's song Why Am I Like This and Post Malone by Sam Feld. Moreover, after repeated A/B switching, I thought I heard the SH-9 present vocals marginally more clearly. The bass sounded identical, however. Bass slam and clarity was indistinguishable. Treble was comically similar. Not a single treble instrument sounded clearer or more forward or more or less accurate on either amplifier. What do these tests show? When neutral sources are compared, they should sound nearly the same. Some variation is always possible, but significant material alterations? No, not in these test parameters. If the sound signature results did not grab your attention, then the SH-9's power output results should, and not in the positive way. Let's talk about the good stuff first. The SH-9 can easily power nearly any headphone on the market. I tested the Modhouse Argon, Beyerdynamic T1 2nd Gen, the Avantone Planar, and the HD6XX. All of these headphones have different power requirements and all got plenty of power for their respective drivers to perform at peak. Rest assured that if you buy the SH-9, it's highly unlikely you will want more power for your gear. Moreover, I could not detect any channel imbalance with my gear. The amplifier is also dead silent. Now, for the not so good. SMSL, just like Topping, are providing very little transparency when it comes to specifications for the SH-9. Whether you go to Apple's Audio or SMSL's website or anywhere else, the specifications are exactly the same. SMSL says that the SH-9 provides 6 watts into 16 ohms, 3 watts into 32 ohms, 440 milliwatts into 300 ohms, and 220 milliwatts into 600 ohms. They do not say how they achieve these measurements. They don't say if these measurements are for balanced or unbalanced output. SMSL doesn't even bother to tell us what voltage from the DAC was used. This is becoming a big problem. This is clearly misleading information, and manufacturers, particularly Chinese brands, keep getting away with it. Luckily, we have independent agencies to do measurements. Audio Science Review measured the SH-9. They found that on unbalanced, the SH-9 provides 1.7 watts into 33 ohms and 226 milliwatts into 300 ohms. It looks like ASR used 4 VRMS to achieve this measurement. Moreover, ASR found that there is no volume difference between balanced and unbalanced output. This begs the question, why is there such a discrepancy between SMSL's power numbers and ASR's measurements? ASR found that the SH-9's XLR headphone output is not actually balanced. If you read the SH-9's written specifications, there is no mention of VRMS. So you don't know the voltage the amp got when SMSL measured the amp's power output for headphones. I went back and forth and looked through the marketing material, and finally realized that the answer was right there, jumbled in among all the pointless factoids for SNR and THD. Just look at how far down the list this information is. You could easily miss it. Here's the answer. SMSL evidently used 5 VRMS signal, not 2, not 4, 5. Most DACs have 2 VRMS output. DACs with balanced XLR output have 4 VRMS. The matching SMSL DAC, the SU9, does have a maximum voltage output of just over 5 VRMS. So I suppose SMSL paired the two products together, then measured the power output of the SH-9. That's pretty sneaky, especially when SMSL doesn't tell you. This explains the discrepancies between ASR's measurements and what SMSL claims. Compared to the Schiit Magni, that amp has only unbalanced output. It provides 2.8 watts into 16 ohms, 2.4 watts into 32 ohms, 1.6 watts into 50 ohms, 410 milliwatts into 300 ohms, and 215 milliwatts into 600 ohms. Next, look at the Schiit Magnius. This amp has both balanced and unbalanced output. The balanced output of the Magnius is more powerful than what you get on the SH-9. I don't think anybody needs 6 watts into 16 ohms. What possible scenario requires this? SMSL is not alone in doing it. Clearly, Schiit, Topping, and other brands have a similar mindset. But that's just the point. The SH-9 has nothing special in this regard. For 1/3 the cost of the SH-9, the Schiit Magni has nearly identical power output at 32 ohms or higher. Or in the alternative, take a look at the Schiit Magnius. At almost $100 cheaper than the SH-9, you'll get far greater power output. I recognize that some people are all about power. If that's you, then the SH-9 is not the king of the hill. Then there are those who just want an amplifier that will easily power their gear. If that's you, then the SH-9 does as good a job as the cheaper options. It is pretty tiring to review amplifiers and DACs. They are so much alike these days that it gets boring after a while. I don't know how Zeos, Joshua Velour, The Headphone Show, and countless hype reviewers gin up the overflowing positivity for each product they touch. I can't do it. I cannot force myself to be excited about a product that has pointless features and similar performance to products that cost less. When I look at the SH-9, I see a fundamentally good product. It does nothing wrong. THX does not add anything to the equation other than an increase in price, but THX also does not take anything away from the experience. The LCD screen is fine, but a gimmick. I'm sure people would think it's attractive, yet there's nothing you can do with it. There's no customization, for example. There's 3 bits of static information: input, gain, and volume. Big deal. Is it a talking point? Sure, for the first 5 seconds. The power output is perfectly agreeable, and to be honest, far more than most people actually need. Even the hard-to-drive T50RP mods will get plenty of power. The build quality is quite frankly excellent. The fit and finish is commensurate with premium products. All of this is positive and does not detract from the SH-9's package. But there are practical issues that do concern me. This brings us to value. I am struggling to find value in the SH-9. $300 is a lot to ask for, and SMSL needs to give us a convincing reason. When compared to far cheaper amplifiers, the SH-9 sounds nearly identical. There's no difference. I'm sure I'll get comments about my ears being bad, or that I'm not using the gear that's sensitive enough, or gear that's just too cheap. I'm going to nip this nonsense at its inception. My ears are perfectly fine. Thank you for your concern, but my hearing is still within norms. If people are so adamant that they hear a difference, then I strongly encourage them to invest in a passive AB switch and conduct their own tests. If you're serious about comparing gear, then an AB switch is the very least you should have. Moreover, just because someone thinks they hear a difference does not make it true. After all, it's very easy to claim there's a difference when you're already invested in a product. I have noticed a glaring omission from reviewers, both on YouTube and in the forums. It is exceedingly rare to find a reviewer that does genuine A/B tests of gear. And when I say genuine, I mean with a passive switch box. Plugging and unplugging headphones is not a particularly good way to test 2 amplifiers, for example. You cannot match volume that way. Moreover, it is nearly impossible to hear alterations in the sound when you listen on one amplifier, stop the music, unplug your headphones, then plug it into the second amplifier, then press play again. You're relying far too much on your memory, and that does not even bring the mismatched volume issue into picture. I'm not saying that you will never hear a difference among gear. That's clearly not the case. Instead, I'm telling you that until you do a more consistent, thorough test, you're leaving far too much to your own imagination. To those who claim that I did not hear a difference because my gear wasn't good enough, well, this is an easy argument to refute. If you have to use super sensitive or uber expensive headphones or DACs to notice differences, then clearly the product is designed quite badly. And since SMSL does not say you need premium components throughout the chain, I'm going to go out on a limb to conclude nobody actually needs to have special equipment for the SH-9. The point is this: when people want to like something, they'll find a way to like it. They'll convince themselves there is an improvement. Is it any wonder that every time a new amp or DAC shows up on the scene, the same reviewers talk about how amazing the newest product is? What alterations are being made to the gear from month to month by the same company? Lower THD and SNR make literally no audible difference. Shoehorning THX modules into an amp does not make the sound signature better. THX is meaningless. Yes, the THX amp circuits will provide lower and lower THD and SNR. Maybe sometime they'll get into the negative numbers. But the vast majority of modern amplifiers already have THD and SNR that is well below audible levels. What more can you possibly do? Once an amplifier is neutral, that's it. You don't get more and more neutral with less and less THD. That's not how reality works. Then there's the issue of false marketing about the power output. It's a total lie. You will not achieve 6 watts or anything like what SMSL claims unless you buy their matching SU9 DAC, which costs $500. SMSL apparently used a 5 ERMS signal, something you cannot do with any other DAC. At best, your power output would be similar to what ASR was able to achieve using 4 VRMS. I think this practice of misleading customers is reprehensible. SMSL buried the information, and quite frankly, any reviewer who hyped the SH-9's purported power output should have to answer for this blatant discrepancy. I would like to know why people regurgitate specifications without trying to figure out how those specifications were achieved. Now perhaps you can understand why I cannot invent excitement for these products. There's so much nonsense to wade through that it is just too exhausting. As I've said before, there's nothing sonically wrong with the SH-9. If you bought it and like it, then you should be perfectly happy. If it does work in your setup, then there's no reason to replace it, nor is there any reason for you to take offense. If you're thinking of buying the SH-9, I will emphasize that this amplifier is generally a good product. You won't necessarily make a mistake if you buy this instead of another cheaper alternative. However, there is nothing groundbreaking about the SH-9. The only meaningful difference between the SH-9 and the shit products is the LCD screen. The THX implementation is bogus, the marketing fluffs SMSL uses, and it's the same marketing vomit that many audiophiles regurgitate mindlessly, makes no difference in reality. THX is often used as a way to claim that an amp has super low noise. Well, that's true. The SH-9 has inaudible noise, just like the $100 Liquid Spark and the Shit Magni or the $150 FiiO K5 Pro. And none of those devices have to resort to THX modules. The sound signature of the SH-9 is neutral as on the Liquid Spark, Heresy, and K5 Pro. In other words, if you do an actual A/B test, there will be little to no difference in sound, at least among these 4 competitors. Assuming your headphones receive sufficient power during the A/B test, I find it very hard to believe you'll be thrown out of your chair when you listen to the SH-9. I am not saying that every amplifier sounds like the SH-9 or that the SH-9 sounds like every amplifier. That is not true. But the tests I conducted demonstrate that the tonality among the 4 neutral amps, the SH-9, Heresy, Liquid Spark, and K5 Pro, was essentially identical. And this is where I have to leave it. $300 is far too much money for the SH-9. I will grudgingly say that it might be value, but I am left unconvinced. I judge value in one of 2 ways. If a company sent me a product, I ask myself if I would buy it. If I bought the product, I ask myself if I would keep it. I would never buy the SH-9. It simply offers no value to me. But then again, I also have many amplifiers to choose from, so the SH-9 has no place in my setup. It is not different enough to warrant me buying it. I mean, the Liquid Spark and Shit Magni don't leave room for the SH-9 in my home. This does not mean that someone else won't find value in the product. My suggestion is that you be very careful in your research before you buy the SH-9, or any other product for that matter. The SH-9 is a fine amp, but there are cheaper alternatives you should definitely look into.